We're live.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the ICHRRF monthly Speaking Up series. My name is Dr. Adityanji. On behalf of the ICHRRF, I welcome all of you. That is the logo of the ICHRRF, and ICHRRF stands for International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom. So on behalf of the Board of Directors, as well as the executive team, I welcome all of you for our monthly Speaking Up series. A little bit about ICHRRF. We are a non-profit. We are registered in United States, and we are focused on upholding human rights and religious freedom all over the world through continuous monitoring, intervention, and collaboration. We are focused on education, research, advocacy, and we strive to, be an advocate for human rights and religious freedom of underrepresented communities all across the world, and that also includes United States. We believe that humankind can no longer afford to be selectively vocal about the rights of only a specific set of people or a specific group. A just and humane world requires fair treatment of all living human beings. Our focus is on indigenous rights and freedoms, free speech and their cultural preservation. Therefore, at the ICHRRF, we try to be the voice of the voiceless. Some of our initiatives include monitoring violations of the freedom and sanctity of philosophical minorities across the world, research into documentation of the culture, history, and civilizations faced by such communities, policy recommendations on human rights, religious diversity, and pluralism to international organizations, agencies, national and local governments, collaboration with similar-minded organizations to support the cultural and philosophical diversities across the world. We have a Professor Ved P. Nanda Memorial Fellowship Training Program. We do an annual conference. The last year, the annual conference was in October at George Mason University, and topic of our conference was atrocities on women. So we are very blessed to have our distinguished speaker today, Ms. Fraidy Reiss, and she will be speaking on child marriages in United States. Just for the sake of record, today is Sunday, March 29th. It is 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So those of you registered using our True Karma link and flyer probably saw this poster. And of course, that is our esteemed speaker that you also see on the camera. Frida is a survivor turned activist. She was only 19 when she was forced to marry a stranger, and this turned out to be a very sort of abusive experience for her. I'm not going to, belabor on her sort of bio because she's a speaker and she will speak about her lived experience. But I will say that she has been a very vocal activist. She has pretty much dedicated her life to the cause of preventing, abolishing, and helping the survivors of child marriages in United States. She is very well read. She has been on several platforms. I don't want to read through all this bio because the proof of pudding lies in eating. So I want you to personally experience what her experiences have been. Again, this is Freda, and this is a picture about, some of the child brides and things like that. So child marriages in United States, she will speak about United States as well as Ohio and the way our society treats the girl child. This subject is getting more and more prominence as people are looking into childhood sexual abuse, the issues of pedophilia, grooming. We have heard about Epstein files, how grooming goes, etc., etc. Very sorry to say, child marriage is legal in United States in 34 states still. The 16 states that have implemented ban with no exceptions, 86% of these include a minor and an adult, often with significant age gap, rather than marriages among two minors, which is a minority actually. Delaware was first state to ban this practice in 2018. And I must say that the awareness about this started only around 2015 when Unchained, this organization, started to research and started to raise voices against this practice. Again, very sorry to say that United States, the only United Nations member state that has not yet ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is very unusual that on one hand we proclaim to be the defender of human rights everywhere, but under the so-called doctrine of American exceptionalism that United States cannot do any wrong, our political setup refuses to endorse the UN conventions. And this is one such example. Unlike in countries where child marriage is illegal but persists, the problem in United States is laws themselves, because laws are permissive, laws allow, and there's not really much effort to change the laws. As of June of 2025, there were 4 states that have no statutory minimum age when people, I won't say children, I'll say people can get married. And these 4 states are California, Mississippi, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. There are a lot of stereotypes about child marriages, the ethnic background, the religion. I'm citing this issue just to dispel that myth and the notion. 1970s and 1980s, we had a very famous actor, model, and almost a sex symbol, Bo Derek. Bo Derek was 16 years old when she was quote unquote into a common law marriage with John Derek, who was the producer and director of a movie. He was 53 years old. And they had to run away to Germany to escape John's prosecution under the statutory rape laws of California. They came back from Germany to United States when Bo Derek turned 18, and then they got legally married. So I'm using this example, there are exceptions, there are no stereotypes. Stereotypes are the myths. Nearly 300,000 children under the age of 18 were legally married in the United States between year 2000 and 2018. There are more girls, minor girls, 86% of them are girls and only 14% are boys. As we say, we speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. So that is our job and that is what we are doing. Before I hand over the platform to our esteemed speaker, there are some housekeeping rules. Please keep yourself muted to avoid noise interference. Please change your cell phone setting to vibration mode. Please do not interrupt our esteemed speaker. When she is speaking, nobody asks question. Only when she is finished, we will have question and answers. All the questions are moderated through chat rooms, and we would not allow any anonymous questioners, please. Please be very specific in asking a question. Don't write lengthy lectures or monologues in the chat room. I would ignore them. This event is being recorded. This will be available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website as a resource material within 24 hours. Those audience members who need a certificate of attendance can request Christina Kalasunas at ICHRRF. And we request our US-based audience members, please support financially and donate to ICHRRF. The link for donation is on our website. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Ms. Fraidy Reiss to deliver this lecture. We are truly honored to have you on our platform. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate such an informative introduction and this opportunity to talk about something that just isn't spoken about enough in the United States: forced marriage and child marriage. I want to start, if it's okay, by just explaining why this is so important to me personally. This is for me, this is very personal work. As you said, basically devoted my life to ending forced and child marriage. And that's because I personally experienced this trauma. I was 19 when I was forced to marry a stranger. And this was in Brooklyn, in New York City. So this is not in some remote developing country. In the community where I grew up in a fundamentalist religious community, really a cult, where this is just the norm. Your parents and a matchmaker arrange a marriage for you when you are young with very little, if any, input from you. And as a bride, in fact, right there in New York City in the 1990s, I was forced to undergo a virginity exam. I was subjected to a gynecological examination to confirm that my hymen was intact and that I was a virgin. And within my marriage, unfortunately, first of all, week one, I discovered that the stranger I was forced to marry was violent and unstable, but there was just no way out. And the first thing keeping me trapped in place was the fact that I had absolutely no sexual or reproductive rights within this marriage, within this community. I was required to have unprotected sex with my husband, not only on my wedding night, but on a monthly basis thereafter. So that's basically a lifetime of rape. And these rapes were timed for when I was ovulating. And that's for an obvious reason. My first child was born 11 months after my wedding, and pretty soon I had 2 children. I love my daughters, but I did not consent to having them. And it wasn't only sexual and reproductive rights that I lost within this marriage that kept me trapped. I also had no financial rights. I was not allowed to have my own job or bank account or credit card. I was required to remain financially dependent on my husband. And I had limited legal rights. In this community where I grew up, a man is allowed to grant a divorce, but a woman is not. As a woman, I didn't even have the legal right to end my own marriage. So I was trapped for 15 years in this marriage that was abusive from the first week. And when I finally managed, after 15 years, to escape on my own with my 2 daughters, my family and community retaliated by shunning me. They declared me dead. In fact, one of my sisters told me that my family was planning to go through the religious mourning ritual for me as if I had literally died, which until today I don't know if they've ever done, because I've had almost no contact with my family in about 20 years since then. But I rebuilt my life on my own, clearly not dead. And in 2011, I founded Unchained At Last, which was at the time, and it remains, the only organization in the world dedicated to this urgent work of ending forced marriage and child marriage in the United States through both direct services and systems change. So let's first define a forced marriage means one or both parties do not give full free consent. It can happen at any age. For me, I was 19. It is recognized as a human rights abuse. It's recognized as a form of modern slavery. It means, like with me, it often means a loss of sexual and reproductive rights. It comes with myriad other abuses. It often means a lifetime of rape, abuse, domestic servitude, and it's extremely difficult to get out of a forced marriage for someone who has limited or no options entering into a marriage. Typically, it's the same if they try to leave it. And in fact, a marriage can become forced. Even if someone enters into it willingly, if they're then prevented from leaving, that still meets the definition of a forced marriage. Now, at Unchained At Last, we support individuals who are escaping either an existing forced marriage, they've already been forced into it, or impending. They're about to be, or it's almost always their own parents. When someone is forced to marry, it's almost always their own parent who plays a crucial role in facilitating it. So when someone reaches out that they're about to be forced to marry, or their parents are starting to talk about it, or they've already been forced to marry, we provide crucial, comprehensive, often life-saving services. Everything from helping them escape, and that can be internationally. Sometimes, in many cases, in fact, parents have taken them overseas or are planning to take them overseas to force them into marriage in a country where you can't pick up the phone and call 911 to get any help. So we help them in those situations, or if they're they get back to the U.S. and back to safety, or in the U.S., we help them get to safety and help them with social services, financial services, legal services, always for free. We never charge for any of our services to help them escape a bad situation, rebuild their life, and achieve safety, autonomy, and just dignity and hope. And in the years since I founded Unchained in 2011, we have been able to provide these crucial services to more than 1,290 individuals from across the United States, mostly women and LGBTQ individuals. And it felt pretty great to be able to take my trauma and turn it into a force for good. There are very few things that are as healing and empowering as being able to turn your own trauma into a way to help others. But then a terrible thing happened. More and more girls under age 18 started reaching out to us at Unchained At Last to ask for the same help we were providing to adults, help escaping an impending or existing forced marriage. And we realized there's almost nothing we can do for them if they are not yet 18. It doesn't matter how mature or feisty or brave they are. If they're not 18, they have limited legal rights. There's almost nothing we can do for them. And that's how we came to realize in about 2015 that the United States does not have only a forced marriage problem. We also have a significant child marriage problem. And again, for definition, a child marriage means one or both parties are not yet age 18 at the point of entry into the marriage. And at the time, marriage before the age of 18, otherwise known as child marriage, was legal in all 50 US states. And unbeknownst to us, I think most people still don't realize that this is legal across most of the United States. And it was also happening at an alarming rate. No one knew at the time, in fact, how often it was happening. No one seemed to have any idea about this, but we started researching this at Unchained. And our most recent research shows that since 2000, more than 315,000 minors have been entered into marriage in the United States, almost all of them girls married to adult men. And in many cases, before the girls are even old enough to consent to sex. So look, child marriage sounds bad, but it's not just that it sounds bad. I want to share with you some of the main reasons. There are many, many reasons, but I want to share with you the 4 main reasons that we at Unchained are now determined, in addition to our direct services, we have also taken on the systems change work. We are determined to ban child marriage in all 50 US states. And here are the top reasons, and I hope to convince all of you to join this movement. First, I alluded to this before, child marriage can so easily be a forced marriage. And again, it's not because of maturity. You don't wake up on your 18th birthday and congratulations, you're suddenly magically more mature than you were the day before. And now you are better able to choose a life partner. It has nothing to do with that. But you know what you do wake up with on your 18th birthday in 47 out of 50 states? The rights of adulthood. And in the other 3 states, by the way, you get them at 19 or 21. You don't get the full rights of adulthood in any US state before the age of 18. And that is crucial when we're talking about marriage, because if your parents are planning an unwanted wedding for you, or if you've already been forced to marry, or if you married willingly and then you change your mind, getting out before 18 is nearly impossible, if not actually entirely impossible. So first of all, something as basic as leaving home. The first thing that we do when an adult age 18 reaches out and says, I'm being forced to marry, or I have been forced to marry, is we help them leave home. And sometimes they have to escape out a window if they're being held against their will. But an adult has the legal right to leave home. A minor does not. You leave home in many states, you've committed a status offense. You are a runaway. You can be taken into police custody. So for example, in Ohio, to use that as an example, you leave home before 18, you can be taken into police custody, and then you can be dragged into court, taken back home to your parents, taken to a juvenile detention facility. You just don't have the right to leave home before 18. In many states, if we as advocates help someone leave home before 18, we could face criminal charges. That actually happened in one of the cases that we worked on. One of our volunteers was charged criminally for helping a 14-year-old girl escape an impending forced marriage. Now, a 17-year-old or younger manages to get to a domestic violence shelter without being taken into police custody. Guess what? They're almost certainly going to be turned away. Domestic violence shelters routinely turn away unaccompanied minors. In some states, they're legally required to contact the parents if a child shows up, or they can face criminal charges if they take in an unaccompanied minor. Youth shelters, not a solution. They typically keep kids for approximately 21 days, 3 weeks. And during that entire time, their entire goal is to reunite that kid with their parents, to send them home at the end of the 3 weeks. That is not a solution for someone who is escaping a forced marriage. Now, an adult in this terrifying situation might try to retain an attorney to help them figure out their complex legal needs. Again, that is nearly impossible, if not entirely impossible, if you're not 18, because contracts with minors across the United States are typically voidable or void. The retainer agreement is a worthless piece of paper. We've had girls call and say, I called every attorney in my state. No one will take me on as a client. And then, perhaps most shockingly, minors are not allowed to bring a legal action in their own name until they become an adult at age 18 or older. And therefore, in many states, they're not even allowed to file for divorce. So a parent and or a judge can enter them into marriage. There's no state where a minor can just walk into the clerk's office and get married. It's a parent and or a judge gets to make this decision for them. And then in many states, they're not even allowed to file for divorce. So this is why the United Nations considers all marriage before 18 to be forced marriage. Minors do not have the legal rights that they need to give full free consent to marriage, because they don't have the rights that they need to say no to marriage. So by definition, a marriage before 18, even if both parties say yes, is considered a forced marriage. And by the way, when girls reach out and learn how limited their options are, many turn to suicide attempts and self-harm because death seems like the only way out to them. Reason number 2 that marriage before 18 needs to end in the United States today is it destroys almost every aspect of a girl's life, the same way it does in any country around the world. Here in the United States, a girl who marries before 18 faces devastating lifelong repercussions in terms of her health, her education, her economic opportunities, her physical safety. She is much more likely to experience physical and sexual violence within that marriage, much more likely to be forced to endure what I endured without her consent: pregnancy, childbirth, and parenthood without her consent. And this is why the U.S. State Department calls marriage before age 18 a human rights abuse. This is why the United Nations calls it a harmful practice that hinders gender equality. And this is why the whole world, including the United States, has promised under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to end forced and child marriage by year 2030 to help achieve gender equality. Reason number 3, in case I haven't fully convinced you, child marriage creates a workaround for statutory rape laws. In many states, you can marry before you're old enough to consent to sex. And in most states, statutory rape that takes place within marriage is not considered a crime. You cannot be prosecuted for statutory rape within marriage in most states. So if you rape a child once, shame on you, you're going to prison. But if you sign up to rape them again and again and again, congratulations, we'll give you a marriage license. It's a get out of jail free card for child rapists. And then reason number 4, it also creates a workaround for human trafficking laws. It legalizes and incentivizes the trafficking of minors under the guise of marriage. And this is because of a very shameful loophole in federal law. The federal government, instead of setting a minimum age a minimum age for spousal visas, the way it sets, for example, to petition for your parent to come from another country, you need to be 21 years old. But to petition for a spouse, instead of setting a minimum age, the government defers to state law. What is the marriage age in the state where the couple will reside? And because in some states, the marriage age remains 0, that means that children in the United States, as young as the youngest marriage age allowed in that state, and these are almost always girls, can be trafficked legally for their citizenship, dragged overseas, forced to marry an adult man who then gets a visa and a path to citizenship, and a child bride he can legally rape with impunity. And men in the US can legally import a child bride. Whatever age the marriage age in that state is, he can import a girl that age from any country around the world, sex traffic her to the US as his bride, legally under the guise of marriage. And the US Senate Homeland Security Committee issued a report recently showing thousands of children are being trafficked legally under the guise of marriage because of this loophole in federal law combined with weak state laws. Almost all of them are girls married to adult men. Some of the ones that have been approved recently, some of these girls have been as young as 13. And parents, by the way, have submitted petitions for children as young as infants. And thank goodness USCIS and the State Department have not approved those, even though they'd be legal in some states. So I hope I have fully convinced you that marriage before age 18 is just bad, okay? But when we at Unchained At Last first realized this in 2015, we jumped into action and we did our research, we discovered all this, and what we realized also is that there's a very simple legislative fix. All we need to do is every state needs to make the marriage age 18, no exceptions. That is legislation that costs nothing. There's no price tag. It harms no one except child rapists. And it ends a human rights abuse. It's so simple and obvious and common sense. So we started going state by state to introduce legislation to this effect. And we thought, oh my God, this is going to be so easy, right? Everyone's going to give us a hug and a high five and pass these bills. And instead, in state after state, legislators rejected or watered down this legislation. And we got all kinds of stupid and what we call vomitocious excuses for clinging to child marriage. The most common one being, I don't know, I'm just old fashioned. I just think if a girl gets pregnant, she has no choice but to marry, even if she was raped. And in fact, in a moment of sheer frustration, all of us on the Unchained team promised that when the first US state finally took the drastic step of banning child marriage, we would all get tattoos to commemorate the victory. And I am very proud to show you my tattoo. It is a broken chain because in 2018, Delaware became the first US state to ban child marriage. And thank you for the applause. And since then, we have convinced legislators in 16 states and DC and 2 US territories to make the marriage age 18, no exceptions. And that means we have only 34 states and 3 territories to go. And by the way, for those of you who are from Ohio, that includes in Ohio, where when I was talking about legislators rejecting or watering down legislation, in 2019, that's what legislators in Ohio did. Instead of making it 18, they made it 17, and with all kinds of, workarounds and safeguards, and they just couldn't bring themselves to make it 18, no exceptions. I don't know why. It's not that complicated. And I can talk more about Ohio also. But for now, I just want to say there is legislation pending in Ohio and in states across the United States, in those 34 states that still allow child marriage. There's legislation pending, simple, common sense legislation that costs nothing, harms no one, ends a human rights abuse. We can do this. There are some human rights abuses that we all agree are terrible, they're heartbreaking, but we don't really know what to do about them. We probably will not be able to eliminate them in our lifetime because they're just too complicated. Child marriage in the United States is not one of those. Unlike those human rights abuses, child marriage in the United States is a human rights abuse we can all agree is terrible, and there is a simple legislative fix. We can ban child marriage in the United States not only in our lifetime, but we can do it by this time next year. All we need to do is join forces, stick together, and insist that our legislators do the right, common sense, obvious thing. Make the marriage age 18, no exceptions, in all 50 US states and all 5 territories and DC. Let's do it. And I'm very happy to take any questions you might have.
There are questions. The first question is coming from, actually, there are questions by everyone. So I will go back. I'll start with Terry's question. How do you engage individuals who support child marriage as a cultural practice? Is dialogue still effective, or does change depend primarily on legislation? That is Terry Michel, who works with us as a volunteer. He is our representative for the youth community in United States.
Yeah, and that's a very important question because, that passing legislation is not a be all and end all. And in fact, what we see often is we ban child marriage in one state, rates in the neighboring state go up because parents just start taking their kids across state lines to marry them off over there instead. So obviously, having conversations about the harms of child marriage and not even about waiting until 18, because forcing somebody to marry at 18 is just as bad. Well, I shouldn't say just as bad, almost as bad. I mean, at least they have legal options in that case, but it's still a human rights abuse at any age. So our hope at Unchained at Last, and one of the things that we focus on as we're going state by state to promote this legislation, is to start conversations about the value of girls and about the harms of forced and child marriage, and to get, we hope, to with legislation banning it and these conversations, to move that cultural piece as well. Legislation has a very, very is a powerful force, and these conversations also are powerful, and we hope that we can help make parents see that it's not just that it's no longer legal in your state, it's also just not a good idea. It's also just not something that is helpful to your daughter, because in many cases parents think that they're helping. You're not helping them by subjecting them to this harmful practice.
Okay, I'll go to the next question. It is by Dr. Nagesh Borse. Dr. Borse is based in Washington, D.C. He's a healthcare epidemiologist by profession, works for the D.C. government. He also serves on our International Advisory Board. The question is, what is the percentage of these child marriages in Christian families? Is it possible that state laws do not, basically legislators do not want to go against Catholic Church historically, and Bible justifies it? So is
Mm-hmm.
this the reason why US has not ratified the UN Covenant of Child Human Rights?
Yeah, so there's so many important questions in there that I want to get to all of them. So first of all, in terms of 315,000 minors wed in the U.S. between 2000 and 2021, how many of them were Christian? We do not have any demographic information about the individuals who are married. We specifically requested anonymized data so as not to violate anybody's privacy. So all we have is age of both parties, and best case scenario, if the state does their homework right and presents its data correctly, the gender. But and we also I'll keep track of census data, which census tracks people who are married between the ages of 15 and 17. And census is not allowed to ask about religion, though. So over there we have some information that shows it's happening in every race and ethnicity. But in terms of religion, we have absolutely no idea from the data what religion these people were from. Anecdotally, though, I can tell you, because a lot of these individuals, at least some of them, reach out to Unchained at Last in these situations, we know that it's happening in every community, culture, religion, every socioeconomic level. It's not happening in only one area. In terms of pushback from the church, actually, every major religion, including the Catholic Church, supports banning marriage before the age of 18. Catholic Conference has written memos of support for us in multiple states, strong memos. In Maryland, one of the first states where they did this, it was a 2-page memo just excoriating marriage before the age of 18, saying that the Catholic Church would not recognize marriage before 18 as legitimate under any circumstances. And that is code for even if a girl is pregnant. So, in terms of religious pushback, the only religious pushback we have gotten has been from, just small fundamentalist religious communities like the fundamentalist cult where I was forced to marry as a teen, they pushed back really hard and held us up in New York and New Jersey for years because they have it has a strong presence in both of those states. But other than that, and a fundamentalist Christian sect in upstate New York, polygamous Mormon sect in Utah. Other than that, only support from Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Mormon, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh. I mean, every major religion has supported this, and makes it even more powerful. And in terms of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, it is shameful, inexcusable, unconscionable that the United States has not ratified it. I will say, though, that the CRC does not have very strong language in terms of child marriage. It was not nearly as strong as it should be. It doesn't explicitly say that the marriage age should be 18, no exception. So even if the US had ratified Convention on the Rights of the Child, and in fact, other countries that still allow child marriage have ratified the CRC. So that's not the be all and end all. What we do need is a stronger international treaty that says the marriage age should be 18, no exceptions, like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals do.
The next question is from Mr. Clemens. Before I read the question, I already know that the question is a little problematic and I can understand what you are going to say, but I will read the question nevertheless. The question is, instead of laws based on age, why not just have laws requiring explicit consent at whatever age a couple decides to get married? As I said, that I already see loopholes in this question, but I'll let you answer the question.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question. I wonder though how that looks, because in a lot of states, minors already have to go in front of a judge as part of the process of marrying them off. It requires judicial review and judicial approval. And basically, a lot of states have tried this and they put in place all kinds of safeguards. There's a guardian ad litem that's appointed for the child, and multiple in-camera interviews without the other party present, without the parents present, and waiting periods. States have tried all kinds of creative ways to determine whether a minor actually consents to marriage. And what we have seen as direct service providers in state after state that has tried this is all we do in that situation is put the onus on a terrified child whose own parent is forcing them to marry to figure out how to explain their predicament to a judge without facing dire repercussions when they get back home. Remember, these are children. They live with their parents. And in many cases that we have worked on, their parents tell them, here's what you're going to tell the judge today, or else here's what's going to happen to you when we get back home. And I can tell you, of all the survivors we have worked with at Unchained At Last who went in front of a judge as part of the process, every single one lied to the judge. Every single one. And then they leave somehow feeling complicit in their own forced marriage. If I would have only found some way to tell the judge what was really happening, I would have prevented this from happening. So we're just adding additional trauma. How can you possibly determine who is, who consents and who does not? Also, that doesn't solve the many other problems of marriage before the age of 18. It doesn't solve the fact that it's a human rights abuse. It doesn't solve the fact that if this girl changes her mind, she has no way out because she's still a minor. It doesn't solve that imbalance of power between a minor and an adult. It doesn't solve the statutory rape piece. It doesn't solve the human trafficking piece. So unfortunately, that wouldn't help any of this.
Actually, child below age of 18 does not have the testamentary capacity. So the child can give only assent, not consent.
Very good line. Okay. Can I borrow that? Yes.
Sure. And that assent is coerced.
Right.
So that's why I said that I knew before even reading the question that there were loopholes. And if you insist on this, this will be used as a major loophole, because these are kids living it with families, and the bond of family, the emotional blackmail, all those that goes along with the fear of coercion, and in certain communities repercussions in terms of physical violence. all those things are there. We are aware of that thing, so we are not going to get there. If you need a change, you need an explicit change in the law rather than a patch up or a superficial camouflage that actually does not serve the purpose. So I just wanted to join there. There's
Yeah,
another.
and if I could just add, this is why, like when you say assent versus consent, this is why the United Nations considers all marriage before 18 to be forced, because even if a minor says yes, because they don't have the right, so they need to say no, that yes is not considered consent. That is not full free consent. By definition, a minor cannot give full free consent to marriage. And that's it's similar to statutory rape. If you're not old enough to consent to sex, it doesn't matter if you say yes, it's still considered rape.
There's another question as I'm going backward. Again, it is Mr. Clemens. Do you mind sharing the nature of the religious ideology of the cult that you were brought up in? Several modern Western philosophers, the names are mentioned, have justified polygamy and concubinage, including between grown men and very young women. Do you see any scenarios where such marriages have been good?
So no, but also, so where I grew up in the ultra Orthodox Jewish community in New York City. So that's, the extreme far religious, the fringe, fundamentalist fringe that every religion has. That's where I grew up, within the Jewish community. And it's really like a lot of very fundamentalist religious cults. It's just predicated on misogyny, patriarchy, and they kind of pride themselves on the misogyny of it, and not even pretending that women are equal, that women should get any sort of dignity or rights, and that lends itself to perfectly to forced and child marriage. And
Well,
I don't want to, also talk about other religions. I'm not here to talk about religion. I'm an atheist, so I'm not the one to talk about religion. Um, so yeah, but in terms of polygamous marriages and I forget what else you mentioned in your question.
he had asked, actually, some of the Western philosophers had justified not only polygamy but also concubinage. And well, but that was a different era. It's not the same era we are in. We are in 21st century, and our thinking needs to reflect the contemporary realities, not the realities of 8th century or 10th century or 12th century. A lot of things happened at that time, but we are living in a different world today.
Yeah, we like to think that women have some rights right now, and all of those thrive in a patriarchy, not in a world where women are at least striving for gender equality.
So I'll ask you a question of mine. Yes, marriage is a state law, but United States has federalized a lot of things. The federal government is trying to federalize the elections. You know, could there be a case made for a national law explicitly banning child marriages? When the US State Department says that, marriage before age 18 is a forced marriage, is a child marriage, why can't the federal government get its act together? It doesn't cost them a dime actually to have this law. Have you ever approached any of the Congress people to have a federal national law banning child and forced marriages?
That would be amazing, because that means passing one law instead of
Yes,
56,
yes.
when you count all territories and DC. Unfortunately, though, what we discovered early on, because we explored this, we have several large global law firms that are based in New York that do a lot of pro bono work for us, and what we learned from them is that age at marriage has for decades been established within the purview of states' rights. So if the federal government tried to set a marriage age, it would almost certainly set off a battle about states' rights. And it's not something that can easily be done. I mean, we would have to fight that whole battle before we could even get to the question of child marriage. So it seems that the more direct, unfortunately, the more direct route is to go to all 50 states and DC and all 5 territories. However, we did, because thanks to the pro bono research of these large firms, we did identify 10 federal laws that not only allow, but actually encourage child marriage. And we have compiled these and have been working for years now to try to get the federal government to change these. So at least the federal government, if it can't easily set a marriage age, should not be encouraging states to practice, or people across the states to practice child marriage. For example, one of those is the fact that there's no minimum age to petition for a spousal or fiancé visa. So that is encouraging child marriage. We need to change that. And we have found other statutes that are equally offensive.
Okay. There's a question from Kofi Sarpong. We still have some time, so we'll go through the question. Kofi Sarpong says, I'm very astounded that the practice is going on in the part of the world. Which part of ethnic group is predominantly involved in this? So again, you don't have, it's anonymized data, so you don't have that information about ethnic backgrounds and all.
Correct. And we do have census data that, at least for the minors married between 15 and 17, the US Census doesn't ask about marriage before that. I guess the census didn't realize that that's still legal in some US states. As of a few years ago, it was legal in most of the US. So the census data shows that it's happening everywhere. It's every ethnicity, and every race. But yes, the data that we have state by state, it does not have that identifying information. And again, anecdotally also, we're seeing what the census data is seeing. It's when we look at our clients and the survivors who have reached out to say, this happened to me, I want to help prevent it from happening to others, they come from every race, ethnicity, religion, and secular backgrounds. There has some who come from families that have been in the US for many generations, and more newly arrived Americans from countries of origin on every inhabited continent. Is really the commonality that we see, is that it's almost always a girl married to an adult man. Other than that, it's everywhere.
So I would like to play devil's advocate and challenge the process a little bit with a more creative solution.
Okay.
And that solution is a constitutional amendment. So if you enact a constitutional amendment guaranteeing that no child below the age of 18 can enter into a matrimonial union in the territory of United States as a constitutional amendment, yes, anything gets challenged in the courts, etc. But you don't have to go to then 50 legislators. If both chambers of the Congress pass it, President signs it, then it goes to state for ratification. And you don't have to have ratification by 50 states. It is, I think, a limited number of states. I don't remember the exact number, but it is not all 50 states and 5 dependent territories. So you have less work involved there if you go through that route of constitutional amendment. Any comments?
We've had how many constitutional amendments in the history of the United States? I mean, because it's extremely difficult to do. I would imagine that would cost a lot more money and take even more time than trying to go state by state. But you know what? I love this idea. If you can work with us and make this happen, and you have that money, because I'm imagining, I know we've been looking at putting it on, presenting it as a referendum in states where we just cannot do it through the legislative process. And it's millions of dollars in each state. So I would imagine at the federal level, it's billions of dollars. And then, I also wonder if right now would be the right time to do that, considering, the state that the federal government is in right now. It's actually not even fully functioning. The federal government is partially shut down. But anyway, it's a fascinating approach that I fear would be even more expensive and time consuming, but definitely worth a try. And if you can write it a big check.
Well, whatever the costs are there, but there are ways of approaching a problem. So we have a situation that we have at the federal level. We have female legislators. We have both members of the House as well as the senators. So if you organize an educational session for them. Don't call it lobbying, just an educational. So you have a buy-in from a segment of legislators who may be more sympathetic to your cause. And reason I'm harping on the federal level is that local politicians are compromised. Let's be very real about it. They are compromised by their electoral needs, their fundraising needs. They do not have that vision that our politicians at the federal level have. So for whatever it's worth, whether it costs any money, just do a educational conference in Washington D.C. and invite all the female congresspersons, whether senators or members of the House, and see if they will jump up at the idea and run with it.
Well, I mean, we can definitely try. I can tell you that we've been trying since 2017 to get them to amend federal law to stop encouraging child marriage, and so far, exactly no one has jumped at that. So, but it's definitely a creative approach, and I appreciate the creative solution.
There are a number of other questions which are kind of from people who have already asked questions. A member of our audience has not asked questions, so I'm going to involve him into the discussion. Mac, you want to ask any question or make any comments? Please come on, Mac. You have to unmute yourself. You are muted.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Fraidy, for the presentation. Very interesting. Yeah, it sounds to me the case of child marriage in terms of the changes to to ask the states to comply with federal law is almost the same as the female mutilation, where the federal law make it the law that it is illegal to have female mutilation, but some states somehow still practice and they have some way to get around it. Now, listening to your presentation, some states are still, doing that, and you said that there are ways that they get around to, and they still trying to make it that child marriage is active. So I was wondering, the states that still not comply with federal law, let's say if the federal law ban, the State Department already stated that it's illegal to have a forced child marriage. What the state that has that attitude that they still not I guess support the State Department's stand in that regard?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the State Department, calls marriage before 18 a human rights abuse, but the State Department can't make something illegal. So that doesn't mean it's illegal. It just means it's immoral. And when the State Department said this, it was legal actually still in all 50 states. So, that unfortunately does not impact state law. So we use it as a way to shame legislators. Why are you allowing something that the U.S. State Department calls a human rights abuse? But ultimately, the U.S. State Department sets foreign policy, not domestic policy.
Thank you very much indeed, Fraidy, for coming to us, educating us, making us aware. And you have total support from our organization. Should you decide to come back, we would welcome you. Should you require some feedback or help, we are there for you. It's a noble cause. You have done phenomenal amount of work in a very short period of time. You need a pat on your back for the perseverance and persistence as a single person you have done. And hats off to you that you have made this a mission as part of your therapeutic healing, transcend and sublimate into, altruistic aim. So again, my sort of hats off to you for what you're doing. Society is not changed by mass changes in opinion. It's always one person who's the catalyst of change. And I see you as that one person who's catalyst of change. And you have many, many more years ahead of you. We wish you success in your mission. And as I said, there will be various ways we can contribute. So let this not be one end all kind of event. We will welcome you over and over again in this mission of yours. And maybe in our next annual conference, as and when we organize it, usually it is in Washington, D.C., usually it is at George Mason University, where we have some sort of arrangement. I would like to invite you as a keynote speaker.
Well, thank you so much for your kind words. That would be such an honor. And would I be the first atheist to be the keynote speaker at your?
Well, we are for everyone. We are for every marginalized community.
Okay.
Mind you, every underrepresented marginalized community doesn't mean, whether you're atheist, agnostic, everyone has their own, philosophical beliefs, and we are for the protection of the philosophical beliefs.
Well, thank you. That would be a true honor, and I really appreciate your bringing me here, saying such kind words, and agreeing with me that child marriage needs to end in the United States. And I urge anyone who wants to do something about it to go to unchainedatLast.org. You can look up what the marriage age is in your state, and there are specific actions that you can take if we're currently active in your state trying to ban child marriage like we are right now in Ohio. And I hope, thank you, Carl, for sharing that. And I hope all of you will join this. Let's end child marriage in the United States. Let's do it now. Let's keep the United States to its promise of doing this by year 2030. And if you want to write out a big check for a U.S. constitutional amendment, I think that's a very creative idea. Let's try that if we raise gobs of money. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we are not money bags. We are actually volunteers. All of us are volunteers. We work, all of us have day jobs. Nobody is paid through the organization. We work on a very shoestring budget in the belief that an individual can change the societal thinking. That's our, belief. So we are in the same boat, but yes, you have all our support. We wish you luck. And thank you very much indeed. Once the recording becomes available, we'll share it with you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank